not sit next to you. This is my seat. Check his ticket right now! Ma'am, his seat is confirmed.
You need to stop this. You are leaving this aircraft now!
You can't remove me!
Watch me.
Excuse me, I'm not sitting next to him. The sentence cut through the quiet first-class cabin like a blade. Heads turned, conversations stopped mid-word. Even the soft hum of the aircraft felt like it paused. Victoria Langford stood in the aisle, one manicured hand gripping the strap of her designer handbag, the other pointing, not subtly, at the man seated by the window. Dr. Michael Carter didn't look up right away. He had been staring out at the gray London sky through the oval window, his reflection faint in the glass. 55 years old, tired eyes, a face that carried both patience and history. He adjusted his reading glasses slowly, as if the moment might pass if he moved carefully enough. It didn't. I said, Victoria continued, louder now, sharper. There has to be a mistake. I need a different seat. A few passengers exchanged looks. A man across the aisle lowered his newspaper. A woman in the second row leaned forward just slightly, curiosity pulling her in. Michael finally turned. Good evening, he said calmly. His voice was low, steady, polite. Victoria didn't return the greeting. Her eyes scanned him head to toe. The pause lingered too long, too deliberate. No, she said almost to herself, but loud enough for everyone. This won't work. Emily Ross, a young flight attendant barely into her 20s, hurried down the aisle. Her smile was trained, but her eyes already carried a flicker of concern. Mom, is there a problem? She asked gently. Victoria exhaled, sharp and dramatic. Yes, there is a problem. I'm in seat 2B. She tapped her boarding pass, and I will not be sitting here. Emily glanced at the seat, then at Michael. That is your assigned seat, Mom. I know what my ticket says, Victoria snapped. That's not the issue. The cabin grew quieter. Michael removed his glasses and folded them carefully. His movements were slow, deliberate, controlled. He had seen this before. Different cities, different rooms, same tone. Then what is the issue? Emily asked, her voice softer now. Victoria leaned in slightly, lowering her voice just enough to make it sound private, but not enough to keep it from spreading. The issue, she said, is the company. Emily blinked. I'm sorry, I don't understand. Victoria didn't even look at Michael as she spoke. I paid a lot of money for this seat. I expect a certain level of comfort, and I am not comfortable here. Across the aisle, the man with the newspaper stopped pretending to read. His eyes lifted. Michael's expression didn't change. He had spent 4 days at a surgical conference, 4 days discussing children's hearts, fragile things, complex things. He had held lives in his hands. Now he sat quietly, listening to a stranger decide whether he belonged beside her. Emily tried again. Mom, the flight is completely full tonight. I'm afraid there are no alternative seats available. Victoria straightened, her jaw tightened. Then you need to make one available. A few seats behind, a young man named Ryan Brooks slowly pulled his phone from his pocket. He didn't raise it yet, not openly, but he angled it just enough. Something in the air had shifted. Michael reached into his jacket and pulled out his boarding pass. He held it out toward Emily. Seat 2A, he said softly, right where I'm supposed to be. Emily took it with slightly trembling hands. She checked it quickly. Yes, sir, thank you. Victoria let out a short, disbelieving laugh. Of course he has a ticket. That doesn't mean he belongs here. The words landed, heavy, ugly, clear. A ripple moved through the cabin, not loud, not dramatic, but undeniable. Michael felt the weight of it, the eyes, the silence. This was the moment people expected him to react, to argue, to raise his voice, to give them something. He didn't. Instead, he leaned back slightly in his seat. His hands rested calmly on the armrests. His breathing stayed even. Mom, Emily said carefully, the gentleman is a ticketed passenger. There is nothing wrong with his seat. Victoria turned to her sharply. Then move him. Emily froze. I'm sorry you heard me. Move him to economy. Upgrade someone else. I don't care how you do it. Victoria's voice rose again. I am not sitting next to him. Now people were openly watching. Ryan's phone lifted a little higher. A woman in the third row whispered, Did she really just say that? Michael closed his eyes for a brief second. Not out of weakness, out of control. He had learned that years ago, in operating rooms, in places where panic cost lives, control was everything. When he opened them again, his gaze was steady. "Mom," he said, turning toward Victoria for the first time directly, "the only thing making this situation uncomfortable is you." The words were quiet, but they carried. Victoria's face flushed. "How dare you speak to me?" Michael didn't raise his voice. "I didn't start this conversation." A few seats back, someone muttered, "He's right." Emily glanced between them, clearly overwhelmed. This was no longer a simple seating issue. This was something deeper, something heavier than policy. Victoria shook her head, almost laughing now. Unbelievable. Absolutely unbelievable. She turned back to Emily. "Get your supervisor, right now." Emily hesitated, then nodded quickly. "Yes, Mom." As she hurried away, the cabin remained suspended in tension. Michael reached for his book again, but didn't open it. He could feel it. The attention, the judgment, the expectation. He had lived a life where people often decided who he was before he ever spoke, but he had also built something else, something stronger than their assumptions. Across the aisle, the man with the newspaper leaned slightly toward him. "You handled that well," he murmured. Michael gave a small nod. "You learned to." Ryan's phone was fully up now, recording. Victoria stood rigid in the aisle, arms crossed, eyes scanning for allies that weren't coming. For the first time, the balance in the room had shifted. Not completely, not yet, but something had cracked, and everyone could feel it. Emily didn't come back alone. The shift in the cabin was immediate. Daniel Hughes moved down the aisle with steady steps, his presence cutting through the tension before he even spoke. Late 50s, broad shoulders, years in the air written into the lines of his face. He had seen everything, or at least he thought he had. "What seems to be the issue?" he asked, his voice calm but firm. Victoria turned toward him instantly, relief flashing across her face like she had just been handed authority. Finally, someone who can actually do something. Daniel gave a small nod, not committing yet. His eyes moved once across the scene. The standing passenger, the seated man, the watching crowd, the raised phones. He took it all in. "She refuses to sit," Emily said quietly, stepping back, grateful to hand it off. Victoria cut in. "Of course I refuse to sit. Look at the situation." She gestured toward Michael without looking at him. "I've already explained. I'm not comfortable. I want him moved." Daniel didn't respond right away. He looked at Michael. Michael met his gaze. Calm, unshaken, no anger in his eyes, just something deeper, something steady. Daniel had learned to read people quickly. It was part of survival in this job. This man was not the problem. Still, procedure mattered. "Sir," Daniel said, turning fully toward Michael, "is there anything you'd like to add?" Michael rested his hands together. "Only that I'm in my assigned seat, and I'd like to go home. Simple. Clean." Daniel nodded once. Victoria scoffed. "That's not the point." "It is the point," Daniel replied, still calm, but sharper now. "Everyone here has a ticket. Everyone here has a right to their seat." Victoria's lips pressed tight. "Not if it creates a security concern." That word landed differently. Security. A few heads turned again. Daniel's expression changed just slightly. "Mom, can you explain what you mean by that?" Victoria hesitated for half a second, just enough to notice. Then she doubled down. "I am a woman traveling alone. I have a right to feel safe." There it was, the framing, careful, calculated. Across the aisle, the man with the newspaper leaned back, jaw tightening. He had heard that tone before, too. Michael didn't move, but something inside him hardened. Not anger, not fear, recognition. Daniel exhaled slowly. "Mom, this passenger has done nothing to threaten you." "You don't know that," Victoria snapped. "You didn't see how he looked at me. The lie hung there. Thin, weak, but dangerous." Ryan's phone captured every word now. Daniel glanced at the device, then at the other phones. This wasn't just a cabin issue anymore. This was evidence. "Mom," Daniel said again, more firmly, "I need you to lower your voice and to take your seat so we can continue boarding." Victoria didn't move. "I said I'm not sitting down." Her heels pressed into the carpet, hard. The line had been drawn. Behind Daniel, the aisle had begun to clog. Passengers waiting to board were peeking in from the jet bridge. stretching their necks, trying to see what was happening. Time mattered now. Delays meant reports. Reports meant questions. And questions meant consequences. Victoria crossed her arms. If you won't fix this, then I want the captain. A few murmurs moved through the cabin. Daniel held her gaze for a long second. Then he nodded. All right, he said quietly. We'll bring him out. Victoria smiled, not relief, victory. She thought she had won. Daniel turned slightly, speaking into the interphone near the galley. His voice was low, controlled, but there was weight behind it now. Captain Hayes, we need you up front. Situation in first class. Passenger refusing to be seated. A pause. Then a simple response through the speaker. On my way. The words didn't sound loud, but they changed everything. Victoria adjusted her shawl, lifting her chin just a little higher. Good, finally. Michael watched her. Not with anger, with something closer to understanding. He had seen people like her before. Not just in airports, in hospitals, in waiting rooms, in places where fear and control mixed together and came out as something ugly. He didn't feel threatened by her. He felt tired. Across the aisle, the man with the newspaper leaned closer again. You all right? He asked quietly. Michael gave a small nod. I've had worse days. The man almost smiled, almost. A few rows back, someone whispered, this is going to get bad. Ryan adjusted his grip on the phone, making sure the frame was steady. Footsteps approached from the front. Slow, heavy, intentional, and then he appeared. Captain Robert Hayes stepped into the aisle, adjusting his jacket as he walked. His presence filled the space without effort. Years in command had carved something into him that didn't need to be announced. He stopped just short of the confrontation. His eyes moved once across the scene. Emily, nervous, Daniel, controlled, Victoria, defiant, and then Michael. For a fraction of a second, something shifted in his face. Small, almost invisible, but real. He stepped forward. What's going on here? He asked. Victoria turned toward him immediately, her tone changing in an instant. Softer, controlled, almost rehearsed. Captain, thank you for coming. I'm so glad someone with authority is finally here. Robert didn't respond to that. He kept his eyes on Daniel. Brief me. Daniel spoke quietly, efficiently. No emotion, just facts. Passenger in seat 2B refuses to sit. Claims discomfort. Demands removal of passenger in 2A. No disruptive behavior from 2A. Robert nodded once. Then he looked at Michael again. Longer this time. Carefully. Michael met his eyes, and didn't look away. Something passed between them. Not recognition yet, but something close. Victoria stepped forward, trying to reclaim control. Captain, I feel unsafe. I am asking you to remove this Matan from the aircraft. Silence. Robert slowly turned his head toward her. On what grounds? He asked. Victoria hesitated again. Just for a moment. But this time, everyone saw it. The cracks were starting to show. I just told you, she said, her voice tightening. I don't feel comfortable. Robert's gaze didn't soften. That's not a legal reason to remove a passenger. The words landed heavier than anything before. Legal, procedure, reality. Victoria's smile faded. This is unacceptable, she said louder now. Do you know who I am? There it was, the last card. The one she always played. Robert didn't react, but Michael did. Just slightly. A breath in, slow, measured. Because he knew what came next. And somewhere deep inside, he understood this wasn't over. Not even close. Captain Hayes didn't blink. Mom, he said, voice even, I don't need to know who you are. I need to know what you've done. The words landed harder than a raised voice ever could. Victoria's mouth opened, then closed. That wasn't the answer she expected. Not from a man in uniform. Not from someone she assumed would fall in line. You're making a mistake, she said, quieter now, but sharper. My husband is a major investor in this airline. I can make one phone call and Robert cut her off. Mom. One word. Firm. Final. The cabin went still again. Threatening the crew will not help your situation, he continued, and it will not change mine. Victoria's confidence flickered, just for a second. Then she pushed forward again, louder. I am not threatening anyone. I am stating a fact. I am a paying customer, a premium customer, and I refuse to sit next to someone who makes me uncomfortable. Robert turned his head slowly toward Michael. The silence stretched. A long look, measured. Then he stepped closer. So let me ask you directly, Robert said, his voice lower now. almost personal. Have you said or done anything to this passenger? Michael shook his head once. No, sir. No hesitation, no explanation, just truth. Robert studied him for another second. Then something shifted again. A memory, a face, a place. It didn't come all at once, just fragments. Dust, heat, noise, a field hospital somewhere far from here. A man working through exhaustion, hands steady when everything else was chaos. Robert's eyes narrowed slightly. Have we met before? He asked. The question caught everyone off guard. Victoria blinked. What? Michael tilted his head just a fraction. Maybe, he said. It's been a long time. Robert stepped even closer now, his attention fully off Victoria. What's your name, sir? Michael Carter. The name hit. Hard. Robert's posture changed instantly. Not dramatic, but undeniable. His shoulders straightened. His expression sharpened. Dr. Carter, he said, quieter now. Michael gave a small nod. And just like that, the air in the cabin shifted. Completely. Robert let out a breath he didn't realize he was holding. Well, I'll be, he murmured under his breath. Victoria looked between them, confusion creeping in. What is this? Do you know him? Robert didn't answer her. Not yet. He stood there for a second longer, looking at Michael like he was seeing something the rest of the cabin couldn't. Then he turned, slowly, back to Victoria. Everything in his face was different now, colder, sharper. Mom, he said, voice carrying now. The man you are trying to have removed from this aircraft is a decorated combat medic and one of the most respected pediatric surgeons in the country. A ripple moved through the cabin, real this time, audible. Victoria's face drained of color. I didn't know that, she said quickly. Robert didn't soften. That's exactly the point. Silence, heavy, unforgiving. You didn't know who he was, Robert continued. And you decided he didn't belong anyway. Victoria shook her head, panic edging into her voice now. That's not what I said. Robert took a step closer. It is exactly what you said. No one spoke. Even the people in the jet bridge had gone quiet. Ryan's phone was still recording, every second. Michael sat still. He didn't look proud. He didn't look satisfied. If anything, he looked tired. Robert glanced back at him briefly. Something like respect passed through his eyes. Then he faced forward again. Here's what's going to happen, Robert said. Short sentences now, clear, controlled. You have two options. Victoria swallowed. You can take your assigned seat, remain quiet, and we will continue this flight without further incident. A pause, or another pause, longer. You can take your belongings and leave this aircraft. The words hit like a drop. Clean, final. Victoria stared at him. You're choosing him over me? She asked, disbelief cracking through her voice. Robert didn't hesitate. I'm choosing order. I'm choosing safety. And I'm choosing what's right. The answer echoed. Through the cabin. Through the silence. Victoria's hands trembled now. Just slightly. She looked around, searching for support. There was none. Not from the passengers. Not from the crew. Only cameras. Watching. Waiting. A man in the third row shook his head slowly. Just sit down, he muttered. A woman behind him added, You're making this worse. Victoria's eyes flicked toward them, then back to Robert. You're going to regret this, she said, voice rising again, but it sounded different now, thinner, less certain. Robert didn't react. Make your decision, he said. No anger, no emotion, just authority. Seconds passed. They felt longer. Victoria looked at the seat, then at Michael. For the first time, she really looked at him. Not scanning, not judging, just seeing. He didn't look back at her. He had already moved on. His book rested open in his hands now, his eyes lowered to the page. Calm, untouched, untouchable. That might have been the moment that broke her. Her jaw tightened, her shoulders stiffened. I'm not sitting down, she said. The words came out fast, desperate, wrong. Robert nodded once. All right. He turned slightly toward Daniel. Call ground control. Have them send security to the jet bridge. Victoria's head snapped back toward him. You can't be serious. I am. Her breath hitched. I have a gala tomorrow. I have commitments. You can't just throw me off a flight. Robert's gaze didn't move. I can, and I will. The cabin held its breath. Victoria took a step back, then another, like the ground had shifted under her. This is insane, she whispered, but no one agreed. Not anymore. The balance had tipped, and everyone could feel it. The door hadn't even closed yet, but her world already had. The footsteps came before the uniforms, heavy, measured, official. Two airport officers stepped onto the jet bridge, their presence cutting through the tension like a line drawn in concrete. Conversations died instantly. Phones lifted higher. Every eye tracked them as they moved into the cabin. Victoria saw them and froze. For a moment she looked like she might say something else. One last argument. One last push. Nothing came out. Officer Martinez spoke first, voice calm, professional. "Captain, we were called for a passenger removal." Robert Hayes gave a short nod. Yes, this passenger. He didn't point. He didn't need to. The entire cabin already knew. All eyes shifted to Victoria. Her posture collapsed just slightly. Not enough to admit defeat. Enough to show it was coming. "This is ridiculous," she said. "But the edge was gone. You're making a mistake." Officer Martinez stepped closer, not aggressive, just firm. "Mom, we're going to need you to gather your belongings and come with us." Victoria's head snapped toward him. "I'm not going anywhere." The officer didn't react. He had heard that before, many times. "Mom," he said again, "you're being removed for refusing crew instructions and disrupting the boarding process." "I did nothing wrong," she shot back. Louder now, desperate. "I paid for this seat. I have rights." Robert spoke without raising his voice. "So does everyone else on this aircraft." Silence followed. Victoria's chest rose and fell quickly. Her eyes moved again, searching, calculating. No one moved to help her. Not the businessman across the aisle. Not the couple in the back. Not even the people who had stayed silent before. Something had changed. Ryan lowered his phone just for a second, checking the screen. Still recording, still clear. He raised it again. Victoria saw it. Her gaze locked onto the camera. "Stop filming me," she snapped. Ryan didn't lower it this time. "Mom, this is a public space." Her face twisted. "You have no right, actually." Officer Martinez cut in gently, he does. That was the moment. The last bit of control slipped. Victoria turned back to Robert, voice cracking now. "You're really doing this? Over a misunderstanding?" Robert didn't blink. There was no misunderstanding. A long pause. Victoria's shoulders dropped, not dramatically, just enough. Defeat rarely arrives loudly. It settles, quiet, heavy. She bent down, grabbed her bag from the floor with a sharp motion. The leather strap creaked under the sudden force. For a second, she stood there, still breathing. Then she turned. The walk down the aisle felt longer than it should have. Every step echoed. Every face watched. Some looked away, out of discomfort, out of second-hand embarrassment. Others didn't. They held her in place with their eyes. Ryan kept filming. The man with the newspaper folded it slowly, setting it aside, watching in silence. Emily stood near the galley, hands clasped, relief and tension mixing in her face. Victoria passed row after row. No one spoke, no one clapped, not yet. This wasn't a victory, not in that moment. It was something quieter, something heavier, a correction. At the door, she hesitated, just for a second. Then she stepped onto the jet bridge, disappearing from view. The officers followed. And just like that, she was gone. The cabin stayed silent for a few seconds more, as if everyone needed time to process what had just happened. Then someone in the back started clapping, one pair of hands. Slow, deliberate. It spread. Another joined, then another, until the sound filled the cabin. Not loud, not chaotic, steady, respectful, directed not at her downfall, but at what had been protected. Robert didn't react to the applause. He simply turned back toward the front. "Let's get everyone seated," he said. "We're ready to finish boarding." His voice grounded the room again. Normal procedure. Back to order. Emily moved quickly now, guiding passengers, helping stow bags, her hands steadier than before. Daniel exchanged a brief glance with Robert. No words, none needed. Across the aisle, the man with the newspaper leaned toward Michael again. "Well," he said quietly, "that's not something you see every day." Michael gave a small breath of a laugh. "No, it isn't." Ryan lowered his phone finally. He looked at the screen, then at Michael. "Sir, I hope you don't mind. I recorded everything." Michael looked at him. Young, alert, still a little shaken. "No," Michael said, "I don't mind." Ryan nodded. "People should see it." Michael didn't answer right away. He looked out the window again. The gray sky hadn't changed. The rain still streaked the glass. "People should understand it," he said finally. "That matters more." Ryan absorbed that, quietly. The engines hummed louder now as the final passengers settled. Seatbelts clicked. Overhead bins closed. The cabin shifted back into its usual rhythm. Almost. But something lingered. A different kind of awareness. Emily approached Michael's seat, holding a glass of water with both hands. Her voice was softer now, more personal. "Sir, I'm really sorry for what happened." Michael looked up at her. She was young, still learning, still figuring out how to stand her ground in a world that didn't always make it easy. "You handled it," he said. "That's what matters." "I should have stopped it sooner," she said, eyes lowering slightly. Michael shook his head gently. "You followed your training. You stayed calm. That's not small." She looked at him again, a small shift in her expression, confidence returning. "Thank you, sir." She handed him the water. Their hands didn't touch. But something passed anyway. Respect, understanding. Emily moved on. The cabin lights dimmed slightly as the door closed with a solid final sound, locked, sealed, safe. Robert's voice came over the intercom moments later. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your patience. We'll be pushing back shortly." His tone was steady, controlled, the same voice that had held the line minutes ago. Michael leaned back in his seat. He closed his eyes for a moment. Not to sleep, just to breathe. The adrenaline was fading now, slowly, leaving behind something deeper. Not anger, not even relief, something closer to reflection. He thought about the hospital, about the children waiting for surgery, about the parents who sat in silence, hoping for good news. He thought about how quickly people decided who mattered, and how rarely they questioned it. Across the aisle, the man picked his newspaper back up. But he didn't open it. He looked at Michael instead. "You know," he said quietly, "you could have handled that a lot differently." Michael opened his eyes. "Yes," he said. The man tilted his head. "Why didn't you?" Michael considered the question. Then he answered, "Because anger doesn't teach anyone anything." A pause. "And calm does?" the man asked. Michael looked out the window again. "Sometimes," he said, "it gives people a chance to see themselves." The engines roared louder. The plane began to move. And somewhere behind them, far down the jet bridge, the echo of what had happened was still catching up to everyone involved. But up here, something had already changed. The plane lifted through the gray London sky, cutting clean through the clouds, leaving the noise of the ground far below. But the silence inside the cabin didn't feel normal. It wasn't just quiet, it was aware. People shifted in their seats, not restless, just thinking. Moments like that don't disappear when the door closes. They settle into the space, into the people. Ryan Brooks sat 3 rows back, his laptop now open on the tray table. The in-flight Wi-Fi had just connected. Slow at first, then steady. He stared at the video on his phone. 4 minutes, 12 seconds, uncut, clear, every word, every look, every moment. He replayed the part where Victoria pointed. Then the part where Captain Hayes stepped in. Then the moment everything turned. He leaned back slightly. "This is something," he muttered under his breath. The man next to him glanced over. "You recorded that whole thing?" Ryan nodded. "Yeah, what are you gonna do with it?" Ryan hesitated. He wasn't a journalist. He wasn't an activist. Just a marketing guy who understood one thing better than most. Attention. He looked down at the screen again. "Honestly," he said, "I think people need to see it." The man gave a small shrug. "Careful, internet's not always kind." Ryan half smiled, neither was she. He turned back to the laptop. New post. Blank caption box. His fingers hovered over the keyboard for a moment. Then he started typing. "Racist passenger demands man be removed from first class. Pilot shuts it down." He stopped, deleted a few words. Typed again. "Woman demands man be removed from seat. Captain refuses." What happens next says everything. He nodded once, better. He attached the video. No edits, no music, no filters. Raw, that mattered. He hit upload. The progress bar moved slow at first, then faster, done. He sat back. "That's it?" the man next to him asked. "That's it. You think anyone's gonna watch it?" Ryan looked at the screen. "Yeah," he said quietly. "I do." Across the cabin, Michael Carter sat with his eyes closed. Not sleeping, just resting. The rhythm of the plane, the steady hum, it helped. But his mind wasn't quiet, it moved. Through years, through rooms like this one, through moments that looked different on the surface, but felt the same underneath. He remembered being a young resident. standing in a hospital hallway while a family asked if he was really the doctor. Not the assistant, not the intern, the doctor. He remembered the first time he realized it wouldn't matter how many degrees he earned. There would always be moments like this. The difference now was he didn't carry them the same way. Across the aisle, the man with the newspaper finally spoke again. "You ever think about pushing back harder?" he asked. Michael opened his eyes slowly. "All the time," he said. "Then why don't you?" Michael took a breath. "Because I've seen what happens when people stop listening," he said. "And I've seen what happens when they don't have a choice but to." The man frowned slightly. "What do you mean?" Michael turned his head just enough to meet his eyes. "People don't change when you force them," he said. "They change when they see themselves clearly, even if it's uncomfortable." The man leaned back, thinking, processing. "That woman didn't look like she learned anything," he said. Michael didn't respond right away. He looked out the window again. The clouds had thinned. Light pushed through in soft layers. "She might not have," he said, "but everyone else did." That answer sat between them, heavy, true. Up front, Emily stood in the galley, her hands resting lightly on the counter. She replayed everything in her head. Every word. Every moment she hesitated. Every moment she wished she had spoken sooner. Daniel stepped beside her, pouring coffee into a paper cup. "You did fine," he said without looking at her. She exhaled. "Did I?" He handed her the cup. "You didn't escalate. You followed protocol. You kept control." "I froze," she said quietly. Daniel shook his head. "No, you paused. There's a difference." She looked at him. He met her gaze briefly. "Freezing is when you lose control," he said. "Pausing is when you're deciding how to keep it." Emily let that sink in. Then she nodded slowly. "Thanks," she said. Daniel gave a small shrug. "You'll see worse than that. But you handled this one." Back in first class, Captain Hayes stepped out of the cockpit again. Not because he had to, because he wanted to. He walked down the aisle, slower this time. No urgency, just presence. When he reached Michael's row, he stopped. "Mind if I sit for a second?" he asked. Michael looked up. A small smile touched his face. "Not at all." Robert took the empty aisle seat. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Just two men, years behind them. A shared past hovering just out of reach. "I kept thinking I recognized you," Robert said finally. Michael nodded. "I figured you might." Robert let out a quiet breath. "Desert Storm. Field tent outside Basra. You pulled a kid out of a mess he shouldn't have survived." Michael's eyes softened slightly. "Name was Collins," Robert continued. 19. Scared out of his mind. "You stayed with him 6 hours straight." Michael looked down at his hands. "I remember him," he said. Robert shook his head slowly. "I never forgot you." Silence again. "But different now. Full, respectful." "You didn't have to step in like that today," Michael said. Robert turned his head. "Yes," he said simply. "I did." A pause. "People like her count on silence," he added. "They count on people looking the other way." Michael nodded. "And people like you," Robert continued. "Count on doing the right thing even when no one's watching." Michael almost smiled. "Guess we both did our jobs," he said. Robert stood. He adjusted his jacket slightly. "Glad you were on my flight," he said. Michael met his eyes as, "Glad you were flying it." Robert gave a small nod and walked back toward the cockpit. Behind them, Ryan's video had already begun to move. First a few views, then more, a comment. Then another. The algorithm caught it. Engagement climbed. Shares started. Faster, faster. By the time the plane crossed the Atlantic, the world below had already started to react. But up here, at 30,000 feet, the lesson had already landed. Clear, quiet, unavoidable. By the time the cabin lights dimmed, the world outside the aircraft had already begun to change. Ryan didn't realize it at first. He had ordered a drink, closed his laptop, tried to settle into the rhythm of the flight like everyone else. But something kept pulling him back. A feeling. That instinct he trusted in his work. He opened the laptop again, refreshed the page, and froze. The numbers had jumped. Not slowly, not gradually. They had exploded. Views climbing by the second. Comments stacking faster than he could read them. Shares multiplying across platforms he hadn't even posted to. "What the?" he whispered. The man beside him leaned over again. "That fast?" Ryan turned the screen slightly. "Yeah," he said. "That fast." The top comment read, "This pilot deserves a medal." Another. The man in the window seat handled that with more class than anyone I know. Another. Who is he? That one caught Ryan's attention. He glanced forward toward Michael. Still calm, still quiet, still reading, like none of it existed. Ryan sat back slowly. They're asking who he is, he said. The man beside him raised an eyebrow. You don't know? Ryan shook his head. No. The man looked forward too, studied Michael for a moment. Doesn't look like the type who cares if people know, he said. Ryan nodded. That's probably why they should. He opened a new tab, started searching. Name, face, clues. It didn't take long. People online were already connecting pieces. A conference badge visible for a split second in the video. A name mentioned quietly in the background. A recognition from someone who had seen him speak before. Dr. Michael Carter, Chief Pediatric Surgeon, Johns Hopkins. Ryan leaned back again. Well, he said quietly, that explains a lot. The man next to him let out a low whistle, so she picked the wrong guy. Ryan shook his head. No, he said. She picked exactly the kind of person she thought she could. That answer stayed in the air. Up front, Michael had finally closed his book. Not because he was done reading. Because his mind had drifted too far. The cabin had settled into a quiet hum. People resting. Some sleeping. Others staring out into the dark beyond the windows. But peace didn't always mean calm. Sometimes it just meant the storm had moved somewhere else. Michael felt it. Not inside the plane. Outside. In the world he hadn't checked yet. Emily returned quietly, placing a warm towel on his tray. For your hands, she said. Michael looked at it, then at her. Thank you. She hesitated for a moment. Sir, can I ask you something? Michael nodded. When you were sitting there earlier, when she was saying all those things, she paused, searching for the right words. How did you stay that calm? Michael considered the question. Then he answered simply, because I knew who I was. Emily frowned slightly. And that's enough? Michael gave a small nod. It has to be. She stood there for a second longer, taking that in. Then she smiled, not the trained smile, a real one, and walked away. Back in the cockpit, Robert Hayes stared at the instrument panel, but his mind wasn't fully there. His co-pilot noticed. You're quiet, he said. Robert let out a breath. Just thinking. About earlier? Robert nodded. The co-pilot glanced at him. You did the right thing. Robert didn't answer right away. I know, he said finally. That's not what I'm thinking about. Then what? Robert looked out through the windshield. The darkness stretched endless ahead. I'm thinking about how easy it would have been not to. The co-pilot didn't respond. Because he understood. Procedure could be bent. Situations could be avoided. Conflicts could be minimized. All it took was looking the other way. Robert tightened his grip on the controls slightly. I've seen that happen too many times, he said quietly. The co-pilot nodded once. Not today. Robert shook his head. No, he said, not today. Back in the cabin, Ryan refreshed the page again. The numbers were staggering now. Major accounts had picked it up. Public figures, journalists, advocates. The caption had been rewritten a dozen different ways, but the message stayed the same. A line had been drawn, and people were paying attention. Ryan leaned forward, elbows on his knees. This is bigger than I thought, he said. The man beside him chuckled softly. Welcome to the internet. Ryan didn't smile. This isn't just internet, he said. This is something else. He looked up again, at Michael, at the man who had sat through it all without raising his voice, without demanding anything, without proving anything, and somehow proving everything. Ryan stood up. The man next to him looked surprised. Where you going? I'll be right back, Ryan said. He moved down the aisle carefully, stopping near Michael's seat. Sir, he said quietly. Michael looked up. Ryan held his phone out. You might want to see this. Michael hesitated, then took the phone. He watched the screen, his own face calm. Still, silent. Victoria's voice, sharp, loud. The moment everything shifted. The captain stepping in, the removal, the applause. Michael watched the entire clip without changing expression. Then he handed the phone back. Thank you, he said. Ryan blinked. That's it? Michael gave a small nod. What else would there be? Ryan hesitated. They're talking about you, he said. A lot. People are sharing it everywhere. They found out who you are. Michael leaned back slightly. That doesn't change anything. Ryan frowned. It might. Michael shook his head gently. It shouldn't. That answer landed differently. Ryan stood there for a second, processing. Then he nodded. Fair enough, he said. He turned to go. Ryan, Michael said. He stopped. Michael met his eyes. Make sure they understand the whole story, he said. Not just the moment. Ryan nodded slowly. I will. As he walked back to his seat, the plane continued its steady path through the night. Miles above the ocean, far from the noise. But the impact was already spreading, faster than the aircraft itself. And somewhere far below, in offices and homes and quiet rooms, where screens glowed in the dark, people were watching, learning, choosing what they would do next. Because moments like that didn't stay on planes, they followed people home. Across the Atlantic, in a glass tower overlooking Manhattan, Edward Langford slammed his phone onto his desk. So hard, the screen flickered. What do you mean it's everywhere? His assistant stood frozen near the door, tablet in hand, unsure how close was too close. Sir, it's trending across multiple platforms. News outlets are already picking it up. Edward ran a hand through his hair, pacing now. Fast. Tight skirkles. Like a man trying to outrun something that had already caught him. That's not possible, he said. Something like this doesn't just blow up overnight. It did, she replied quietly. He stopped, turned, play it. She hesitated for half a second, then tapped the screen and turned it toward him. The video filled the room. Victoria's voice came first, sharp, clear, impossible to misinterpret. Edward's face tightened. He watched as she pointed, as she demanded, as she crossed the line. Then the captain, calm, firm, unshakable, and then the removal, the applause. Edward stared at the screen long after it ended. The silence in the office felt heavier than the noise in that plane. That's out of context, he said finally. But even as he said it, he knew. It wasn't. His assistant didn't respond. Because there was nothing to say, Edward picked up his phone again, dialed fast. His fingers moving on instinct, it rang once, twice. Victoria answered on the third. Edward, thank God, she said, her voice already breaking. You have to fix this. They humiliated me. That pilot, stop, Edward snapped. The word cut her off instantly. He closed his eyes for a second. Just one, then opened them again. Tell me exactly what happened. There was a pause on the other end. Then she spoke. But the story didn't match the video. Not fully, not cleanly. She softened parts, skipped others, shifted blame. Edward listened and said nothing. When she finished, the silence stretched. Edward, she said. Are you there? I saw the video, he replied. That was it. Everything's changed. Her breathing hitched. It's not what it looks like. Edward walked slowly back to his desk, picked up the tablet again, replayed the moment where she said she wouldn't sit next to him. You questioned whether he belonged there, he said. I was uncomfortable. You demanded he be removed. I felt unsafe. Edward's jaw tightened. The word hung there, heavy, final. No, she said. No, she said quickly. I didn't lie. You lied, this time louder, clearer. Victoria went silent. For the first time since the call began, she had no words. Edward exhaled slowly. You have any idea what this looks like? He asked. I don't care what it looks like, she said, voice rising again. I care what happened to me. Edward closed his eyes again. That was the problem. She still didn't see it. This isn't about you anymore, he said. What do you mean? It means the entire country is watching this, he replied. It means every partner, every board member, every investor is seeing this. A pause. Longer this time, they'll understand, she said. But there was doubt now. Cracks. Edward shook his head even though she couldn't see him. No, he said. They won't. He ended the call, just like that. No goodbye, no reassurance, nothing. He sat down slowly, staring at the screen. The comments kept coming, faster, stronger, not just outrage. Clarity. People weren't confused. They understood exactly what they were seeing. Across the country, in a modest home outside Baltimore, Michael's wife sat at the kitchen table, her phone in her hands. Diane Carter had watched the video 3 times, then a 4th. Each time her chest tightened. Not because she was surprised, because she wasn't. She had seen this before. Different places, different people, same pattern. She pressed play again. Watched her husband sit there, still, controlled, refusing to give anyone the reaction they were trying to pull from him. Her eyes softened. That's him, she whispered. Her daughter, standing by the counter, looked over. Mom? Diane handed her the phone. Watch. The girl took it, watched in silence. When it ended, she looked up. Why didn't he say more, she asked. Diane smiled faintly. Because he didn't have to. The girl frowned, but she was wrong. Yes, Diane said, and he knew that. She reached for the phone again. He's been in rooms like that his whole life, she continued. Rooms where people decide who you are before you speak. The girl sat down slowly. And he just lets it happen? Diane shook her head. No, she said softly. He lets them reveal themselves. That answer settled into the room. Quiet. True. Back on the plane, the cabin had gone darker now. Most passengers asleep. The hum of the engine steady. Constant Ryan was still awake, still watching, still tracking the numbers. He refreshed again. Millions. Already, he leaned back, shaking his head. This is insane, he murmured. The man beside him was asleep now, head tilted, mouth slightly open. Ryan smiled faintly. Then he looked forward again, at Michael, still awake, still calm, like nothing had changed. Ryan stood once more, walked up the aisle quietly. Sir, he said softly. Michael looked up. They're calling you a hero, Ryan said. Michael blinked once, then shook his head. No, he said. Ryan frowned. But I didn't do anything, Michael continued. I sat in my seat. Ryan stared at him. That's exactly it, he said. Michael didn't respond. He just looked out the window again, at the darkness, at the reflection of himself staring back. Somewhere far below, the world was reacting, arguing, learning, choosing sides. But up here, there was only one truth that mattered. And it had nothing to do with titles, nothing to do with wealth, nothing to do with who anyone thought they were. It was simpler than that. Respect. Given or taken. And tonight it had been held. The sun was just beginning to rise over the Atlantic when the first news alert started hitting phones across the plane. Soft chimes, one after another. Passengers stirred in their seats. Screens lit up in the dim cabin, casting pale blue light across tired faces. Ryan's phone buzzed non-stop on the tray table. He picked it up, squinting at the screen. Breaking news headlines, major networks, the same video everywhere. He let out a slow breath. It's gone national. The man beside him blinked awake. What has? Ryan turned the phone toward him. Everything. The man leaned in, eyes widening as he recognized the scene. That fast? Ryan nodded. Faster than anything I've seen. He scrolled. Interviews already being requested. Commentators analyzing the exchange frame by frame. People debating not what happened, but what it meant. That was the part that mattered. Across the aisle, Michael opened his eyes. He hadn't slept. Not really. Just rested in between thoughts that didn't fully leave. He noticed the screens lighting up around him. The subtle shift in energy. The quiet buzz building again. He didn't reach for his phone. Not yet. Emily passed by again, slower this time, her voice softer. We'll be starting descent soon. Michael nodded. Thank you. She hesitated, then leaned in slightly. It's all over the news. He looked at her. I figured it might be. Her eyes searched his face. Does that bother you? Michael thought about it, then shook his head. No, he said. What would bother me is if nothing happened. Emily absorbed that, then nodded once. Back in New York, Edward Langford stood in a conference room surrounded by screens. Every one of them showed the same thing. Different angles, different headlines, same story. His phone rang again. Board member, another. He ignored them all, for now. Instead, he turned to the large screen at the front of the room, paused the video at the moment his wife pointed. He stared at it, long, hard. You built this, he muttered under his breath. Not the airline, not the investment. This moment, this exposure, this consequence. His assistant stepped in quietly. Sir, legal is asking how you want to proceed. Edward didn't look away from the screen. Prepare a statement, he said. What kind of statement? A real one. She hesitated. Sir, no excuses. No spin, he said. We acknowledge it. We condemn it. Clearly. She blinked. Even if it implicates, it already does. He cut in. Silence. Then she nodded, understood. Edward turned back to the screen. For the first time in years, control wasn't his. And he knew it. Back on the plane, Captain Hayes stepped out of the cockpit again as the descent announcement chimed overhead. Ladies and gentlemen, we've begun our descent into New York. His voice echoed, calm, grounded. But as he walked through the cabin, he noticed it. People looking at him differently. Not just as a captain, as something else. A man near the front leaned out slightly. "Captain," he said, "you did the right thing." Robert gave a small nod. "Thank you." Another passenger added quietly. "Not everyone would have." Robert paused, then answered simply, "They should." He kept walking. No speech, no performance, just truth. When he reached Michael's row again, he stopped briefly. "You ready for what's waiting down there?" he asked. Michael looked up. "What's waiting?" Robert gave a small breath. "Press. Cameras. Questions." Michael leaned back slightly. He had expected some attention. "Not that." He nodded slowly. "I'll manage." Robert studied him for a second. "You always do," he said. Then he moved on. Ryan overheard the exchange. He leaned forward, resting his arms on the seat in front of him. "They're not just going to ask questions," he said. "They're going to want a statement. A story. Something they can run with." Michael turned his head. "And what would you suggest?" he asked. Ryan shrugged. "Tell them the truth." Michael almost smiled. "That's usually the simplest option." Ryan nodded. "And the hardest," he added. The plane dipped slightly as it cut through a layer of clouds. Outside, the skyline of New York began to take shape in the distance. Gray buildings, golden light, a city waking up. Inside the cabin, seatbelts clicked. Conversations quieted, but the anticipation didn't fade. It built. Michael finally reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. He unlocked it. Notifications flooded the screen. Messages, missed calls, voicemails. He ignored most of them. Opened one. From Diane, he tapped it. A simple message. "I saw the video. I'm proud of you. Come home safe." Michael stared at the words, read them twice. Then he typed back, "On my way." He set the phone down, closed his eyes again. Just for a second. To hold on to something real before stepping into something bigger. Because once the plane landed, it wouldn't just be about what happened. It would be about what came next. And somewhere deep down, Michael knew this wasn't just his moment. It belonged to everyone who had ever sat in silence. Everyone who had ever been told they didn't belong. Everyone who had ever chosen dignity over reaction. The wheels touched down with a solid thud. The engines roared, the plane slowed, and the world rushed back in, loud, bright, waiting. The plane slowed as it taxied toward the gate, but the energy inside didn't settle. It sharpened. Passengers leaned toward the windows, toward the terminal, toward something they didn't fully understand yet. Then someone near the right side spoke first. "Is that press?" Heads turned. Outside, beyond the glass walls of the terminal, a crowd had formed. Not normal airport traffic, not travelers waiting for family. Cameras, tripods, microphones, clusters of people standing behind makeshift barriers, flashes already going off. Ryan leaned across his seat, squinting through the window. "Oh, wow," he said under his breath. "They're here." The man beside him sat up straighter. "For this?" Ryan didn't answer. He didn't need to. The plane came to a stop. The seatbelts and signs stayed on longer than usual. No one stood. No one rushed. They waited. Because something was different now. Up front, Emily stood near the galley. Her hand still, but her breathing just a little faster. "Is that normal?" she whispered to Daniel. He shook his head. "No," she swallowed. "What do we do?" Daniel looked toward the cockpit. "We follow the captain. Simple, but not easy." A moment later, Captain Hayes stepped out again. He had already removed his headset, adjusted his jacket. His posture was the same, steady, controlled. But his eyes had changed. They had seen the crowd. He walked halfway down the aisle. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, voice carrying clearly, "we appreciate your patience. We're coordinating with ground staff before opening the door. No panic, no explanation, just control, the kind people trusted." Michael sat still. He hadn't looked out the window yet. He didn't need to. He could feel it, the shift, the weight. Ryan stood up this time. He didn't wait. He stepped forward, stopping just behind Michael's seat. "They're here for you," he said quietly. Michael turned. "For us," he corrected. Ryan shook his head. "No, for you and the captain." Michael looked past him now, toward the front, toward the door, toward whatever waited on the other side. He took a slow breath, then stood. Not rushed, not hesitant, just ready. Across the cabin, people watched him. Not like before, not curious, not judging. Something else. Respect. The door finally opened. Not all the way, just enough for a conversation outside. Voices drifted in, low, urgent, controlled. Then the door closed again. A few more minutes' time. Every second stretched. Finally, it opened fully, and the noise came with it. Not loud chaos, but intensity, cameras clicking, voices calling out, names, questions, energy. A path had been cleared just beyond the jet bridge. Security standing firm, holding the line. Captain Hayes stepped forward first. As he crossed the threshold, the volume rose. "Captain Hayes, sir, over here. Can you comment on what happened?" He didn't stop. Not yet. He walked down the short stretch, his pace measured, his expression unchanged. Michael followed a few steps behind, and the reaction shifted. "Dr. Carter, sir, how did you remain so calm? Do you feel you were targeted?" The questions overlapped, layered, relentless. Michael paused, just once. Halfway down the jet bridge, not for long, but enough. He turned slightly, faced the crowd, and in that moment everything quieted. Not completely, but enough to hear him. "I was sitting in my seat," he said. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried. "I had a ticket, just like everyone else." A pause, cameras focused. Microphones pushed closer, and I was treated like I didn't belong, he continued. No anger, no accusation, just truth. "What matters," he said, "is what happened next." He glanced toward Captain Hayes, standing ahead, waiting. "They did their job," Michael said. "They treated people with respect. That's all this is about." Another pause, longer this time. Someone asked, "Do you think this reflects a bigger problem?" Michael didn't hesitate. "Yes," he said, one word. "Clear. People decide things about each other too quickly," he continued. "Based on what they see, not what they know. Silence, real silence now." And most of the time, he added, no one says anything. His eyes moved across the crowd. "But today," he said, "someone did." He stepped forward again. Conversation over. Not because they were done asking, because he was done answering. Captain Hayes waited until Michael reached him. Then the two men walked side by side, through the corridor, past the cameras, past the noise, into the terminal. Inside, the crowd was larger. People standing on chairs, holding phones high, trying to see. A ripple moved through them as the two men entered. Applause started again. Not loud at first, then building, spreading, filling the space. Michael didn't stop. He didn't wave. He didn't acknowledge it. He just kept walking. Because this wasn't about being seen. It never was. Ryan watched from behind, still holding his phone, still recording. But this time, not for the world. For himself. Because he knew. Moments like this didn't happen often. Not real ones. Not ones where the line was clear. Right. Wrong. And the choice in between. As the crowd parted, Michael spotted them. At the far end, waiting. His wife. His daughter. Standing just beyond the barrier. He slowed. Just slightly. And for the first time since the plane left the ground, his expression changed. Softened. He stepped forward. Dropped his bag. And pulled them into his arms. No cameras mattered in that moment. No headlines, no noise, just that. Just home. Behind him, Captain Hayes paused, watching, a small smile forming. Not for the crowd, not for the attention, for the outcome. Because in the end, that was what mattered. Not the confrontation, not the video, not the reaction, but the reminder. That respect isn't complicated. People just choose to forget. And sometimes it takes a moment like this to make them remember. The applause faded slowly, like a wave pulling back from shore, leaving behind something quieter, something real. Michael stood there a moment longer, his arms still around his family, his daughter's face pressed into his chest, his wife's hand gripping his shoulder like she wasn't ready to let go. "You okay?" Diane whispered. Michael nodded against her hair. "I am now." He pulled back just enough to look at her. There was no need to explain. She had seen everything. Understood more than most ever could. "You didn't change," she said softly. Michael gave a faint smile. "I didn't need to." Behind them, the crowd still lingered. Cameras lowering now. Voices softer. The moment had passed, but the weight of it hadn't. Captain Hayes approached slowly, giving them space until Michael turned. "Thought I'd let you have that first," Robert said. Michael nodded. "I appreciate that." Diane stepped forward. "Thank you," she said, looking directly at him. "For what you did." Robert shook his head. "Mom, your husband made it easy." Michael let out a small breath. It wasn't easy. Robert met his eyes. "No," he said, "but it was right." That word hung there. Right. Simple. Clear. Rare. A man in a suit approached carefully from the side. Not a reporter, not a passenger, corporate. Dr. Carter, he said, extending a hand. I'm David Collins, Executive VP for the airline. Michael looked at the hand, then shook it. We'd like to speak with you privately, Collins continued. And with Captain Hayes as well. Robert's expression didn't change, but his eyes sharpened slightly. About Collins hesitated for a fraction of a second. About what happened and what comes next. Michael glanced at Diane. She nodded once. All right, Michael said. They were led away from the crowd down a quieter corridor into a glass-walled conference room overlooking the terminal. Inside, it was still. Controlled. Safe. For the moment. Collins closed the door behind them, took a breath, then spoke. What happened on that flight, he began, is already having a major impact. Michael said nothing. Robert crossed his arms, waiting. Collins continued. Public response is overwhelming. In your favor, in the captain's favor, and not in favor of the other passenger. That's not surprising, Robert said. No, Collins admitted. But the scale of it is. He placed a tablet on the table. The same video, millions of views. Headlines from every major network. Michael looked at it briefly, then away. I'm not here for attention, he said. I know, Collins replied, and that's exactly why this matters. He leaned forward slightly. We have a responsibility now, as an airline, as a company, to respond correctly. Robert raised an eyebrow. Correctly meaning? Collins didn't hesitate this time. Zero tolerancy. Politely enforced. Silence. Michael studied him. You didn't have that before? He asked. Collins shifted. We had guidelines, procedures. That's not the same thing, Michael said quietly. Collins nodded. No, it isn't. Robert uncrossed his arms. And what about your investor? He asked. The one connected to her. Collins exhaled slowly. He's already called, he said, multiple times. And? Collins met his eyes. He's not calling the shots anymore. That landed. Heavy. Real. What changed? Robert asked. Collins tapped the tablet. The world is watching, he said. And they're very clear about what they expect. Michael leaned back slightly. So this isn't about doing the right thing, he said. It's about doing what looks right. Collins didn't flinch. At first, he admitted, maybe. A pause. But sometimes, he added, that's how it starts. Michael held his gaze, long, then nodded once. Then make it real, he said. Not just a statement. Collins straightened. We will. Robert looked between them. And my crew? He asked. Already being recognized, Collins said. Formally, publicly. Robert gave a small nod. Good. The room fell quiet again, business handled, decisions made. But something else remained. Michael stood. I think we're done here, he said. Collins nodded. Thank you, Dr. Carter, truly. Michael didn't respond. He turned toward the door. Robert followed. Back in the terminal, the crowd had thinned but not disappeared. People still lingered, watching, waiting. Michael walked through them without stopping. Not avoiding, just moving forward. Outside, the air was cooler, sharper, real. His family walked beside him, just steps on concrete. Diane slipped her hand into his. You know this isn't over, she said. Michael nodded. I know, but you're okay with that? He looked ahead, at the city, at the life waiting beyond this moment. I am, he said, because it's not just about me. They reached the curb. A car pulled up. The driver stepped out, opening the door. Michael paused before getting in. He turned back once. Not at the cameras, not at the building, at the people, the ones still watching, thinking, the ones who would carry this moment with them. He didn't wave, he didn't speak. He just nodded, a small gesture, but enough. Then he got in the car, the door closed, the city moved on, but the story didn't disappear, it settled. Into conversations, into choices, into the quiet moments where people decide who they are. Because respect doesn't come from status. It doesn't come from money. It doesn't come from who you think you are. It comes from what you do, when it matters. And if you were there, sitting in that cabin, watching it unfold, what would you have done? That's the question that stays. Long after the plane lands.